Hello everybody and welcome along to Snetterton in Norfolk for the final weekend of racing for the GT Cup Championship. Round 21 of the championship will be coming up very shortly. That is our first of two sprint races that we'll have over the course of the weekend, and of course we will have the two pit stop races as well. We're on the full Snetterton 300 circuit, which means that it's just under 3 miles, this configuration, and it is a circuit that we have visited earlier on over the course of the season. But the weather today here at the circuit in particular feels very autumnal, to say the least. It's slightly cloudy, there's a few spits of rain in the air, and well, yeah, you can definitely tell that whilst there's still leaves on the trees, it's without question autumn now. Now, we did visit the Snetterton 300 circuit in the middle of the year for rounds 7, 8, 9 and 10 of the championship. They were also held on the Snetterton 300 circuit. So let's have a quick look back at what happened last time we were here. In the first race of the weekend, when the lights went out, it would be Richard Neary that would lead the charge up towards Richie's corner, whilst Richard Chamberlain muscled his way through and ahead of John Seal up into second place at the wheel of the Porsche. Everybody else was busy squabbling for positions down through this enormous 36-car field. John Dillon also suffered his first misfortune of the 2021 season with a front left puncture. However, the safety car came out because of a problem on circuit. That was cleared away, and the race was about to get underway with Richard Neary once more looking to try and make good his escape in the lead of the race, while the battles behind continued. John Seal's Lamborghini was coming under pressure from Lucky Kira's example, both of them looking identical, but they do run different groups. And elsewhere down through the order, the Marcos of Andy Roby was coming under pressure from Fraser Smart's Lamborghini. Richard Neary would claim another win in the Mercedes AMG for Team ABBA Racing. It would be Lucky Kira finishing in second place, but the fight between Graham Tilley and the lapped car of John Dillon would continue until the checkered flag came out. In the second race of the weekend, it would be Richard Chamberlain that would lead the charge up towards Richie's corner, with Richard Neary slotting in into second position. A great start from Steve Burgess, however, at the wheel of the Radical would come undone to a degree as there was contact between John Dillon and John Seal at the Wilson hairpin. The Radical and several other cars all having to take to the grass in avoidance. In the hands of Paul Bailey, the unique Brabham BT62 was also starting to carve its way up towards the sharp end of the field. He would hand the car over later in the race to the Scotsman Ross Wiley. At the sharp end of the order, Richard Chamberlain was coming under huge pressure from the Scott Sport Lamborghini of John Dillon. The door was almost open as they went through the bomb hole. Richard Chamberlain just managing to close it in time to hang on to the place. However, later on in the race, there'd be problems for Richard Chamberlain and the Porsche, and those problems would put them out for the rest of the weekend. For the lead of Group GTA, there was a titanic battle as Simon Orange was continually trying to fight off Stephen Walton for the lead. For Freddie Flintoff, his driving was done for the day, and he would hand over the number 10 Ginetta to fellow Top Gear presenter Chris Harris. However, for Chris Harris, his time behind the wheel of the Ginetta did not last long. Problems with the car spelt retirement at Palmer's. For Sam Neary, though, it looked as though it was going to be victory for him and his father and Team ABBA Racing yet again. Their 6th overall win of the 2021 season in the GT Cup Championship. With the easing of restrictions, it was great to finally get an official trophy presentation done. Some very happy drivers receiving their trophies. A special award also for the driver of the day would go the way of Freddie Flintoff. Today, Sam Neary would lead the pack up towards Richie's corner, and from 4th on the grid, the Brabham BT62 of Paul Bailey would end up in 2nd. Contact in the early stages, Andy Roby would head into retirement. Alex Stevenson would get going again, but would fall to the tail end of the field. Having had an overnight engine rebuild, early problems for Steve Burgess, mechanical issues would also put him out of the race. John Dillon was under pressure from Lucky Kira, small mistake at Williams, through would go Lucky to take up an overall podium spot and then start to challenge Paul Bailey for second place, diving up the inside of the Brabham as they went in towards Murray's. Lucky Kira, though, in a straight line, was caught again by Paul Bailey, and the pair would run side by side up towards Palmer, followed by John Dillon, but Dylan would make a mistake and in the background head off onto the grass. The Group GTA leader Simon Orange was having a great battle with Mo Ritson, the pair of them side by side and nose to tail, lap after lap. And there was also a fantastic squabble going on for second, third, fourth and fifth in Group GTH, headed by the number 90 McLaren of Mike Price. John Seal went off and into the barriers following contact with the Brabham of Paul Bailey whilst fighting for the lead of Group GTO, putting both cars out on the spot. Then Tom Rawlings was trying to get himself back ahead of Simon Orange. He got through, but was too late on the brakes at Ritchie's, would spin the car and lose the lead of Group GTH. But for Sam Neary, it was another untroubled race. The Abbott Mercedes that he shares with his father in the pit stop races would come through to make it 3 out of 3 this weekend in GT Cup. And away we go, up towards Ritchie's for the first time. It looks as though Richard Neary has just about got his nose ahead of John Dillon, who slots through into second place. Lucky Kira's third, Graham Tilley fourth. And down towards the bottom of the Bentley straight, this is Nick Phelps trying to squeeze his way through and past the ultimate speed Aston Martin. Got the job done. Mike Brown loses one place. He's now got Fraser Smart in the number 41 Lamborghini queuing up behind him. So Group GTB Porsche, Group GT3 Aston Martin. Nick Phelps doing a really good job. Runs a little bit wide there. Oh, and Chris Kemp came barrelling up the inside of Mike Brown. Contact with the Aston Martin, which then spins in sympathy. James Simons on the right of your screen. Warren Gilbert's going to have to brave it around the outside of Brundle to get the inside for Nelson, and he's going to make it stick. He picks up the place and takes the lead of Group GTC. Fantastic stuff. And the number 88 Mercedes of Richard Neary, who started the car, and his son Sam Neary, the 19-year-old, who brings it towards the checkered flag. 4 out of 4 in the GT Cup Championship. So that was what happened last weekend under clear skies at Snetterton. Very cloudy here and the rain is now starting to fall. We were expecting the sprint race to be dry, but the teams that will be ready in the pit lane will be looking towards the skies and trying to understand as the support race just comes to a conclusion that is just prior to the start of our GT Cup Championship race, what they need to do. At the moment, I would suggest the circuit is certainly dry enough for slick tyres, and particularly as those tyres they'll be putting on will be preheated, but we'll have to wait and see, because as I said, it is the final championship round for the GT Cup Championship, which means we are going to be crowning our overall 2021 champion by the end of play tomorrow. Let's have a quick look at the way the group standings are at the moment. We've got the separate groups for all of the classes. Group GT3 is being head by the car that's won more races than anything this year, the father and son pairing of Richard and Sam Neary. They're on 458 points in the championship, but the Group GTC leading Top Cats Racing Lamborghini of Jensen Lund, who we still wish well with his recovery, isn't driving this weekend. Warren Gilbert will drive solo. Is the Group GTC leader and is also right up there in the overall championship standings. Group GTB championship leader Nick Phelps could stitch up Group GTB in this race that we're about to see. Mathematically, he is highly likely to overhaul the points tally of anybody else in Group GTB, so is likely to be unbeaten at the end of this race, but we'll have to wait and see as to whether the maths work for him. Group GTH has already been secured by Josh Jackson at the wheel of the Orange Racing McLaren, and Group GTA, as long as he starts this race, Simon Orange will pick up the honours in that one. So Josh Jackson in his car, leading Group GTH, the sister car to it, also likely to pick up the Group GTA overall title. And Group GTO is being led by the SBA Race Engineering, Paul Bailey and Ross Wiley pairing. They're not in the Brabham B62 this weekend. That is still at the garage being worked on, waiting for some parts to arrive. So they're out in the Mclaren Can-Am as they were at Donington a few weekends ago. So that gives you the group leaders coming into this particular race weekend. But how does the overall championship sit? And maybe we can just bring up that. Sam and Richard Neary lead the overall championship when we combine all of the groups together. They're on 458 points. Second in the championship is the Group GTC Top Cats Racing Lamborghini on 419. Then it is the number 67 Ginetta that is third in the championship, the first of two cars that we've got really from Orange Racing. That number 67 car is lying third in the championship, which has largely been Simon Orange all season that's been racing that, whereas it's been Josh Jackson that's always driven the Group GTH leading number one car that's there at fourth in the championship. Nick Phelps is fifth, and sixth are Paul Bailey and Ross Wiley. And if you look at that, what that means is that we've got each one of the 6 different groups all represented in the top 6 in the championship, which just goes to show that no matter which group you race in within the GT Cup, mathematically you stand just as good a chance as most others to claim the overall title. So who is it going to be over the course of this weekend? There's still, if I've got the maths right, 126 points available, because subject to the number of starters in each group, then 25 points for a win in your group. There's an extra point for fastest lap, there's an extra point for pole position, and if you race in the final 8 races of the season, there's an extra 20 bonus points that come your way as well. And we already know that Sam and Richard Neary are going to miss out on that because they had gearbox issues in race 3 at Donington Park, so they didn't start race 4, which means that that was one of those final 8 races of the season, so they're going to miss out on those extra 20 championship points for competing in the final 8 races of the season. So we'll have to wait and see as to how it all pans out over the course of what's going to be a very busy weekend here. So with the support race just having concluded, there's a little bit of tidying up for our fantastic Snetterton marshals to try and do. You can see the windscreen wipers there going on the rescue unit that's heading around the vehicle, suggesting that conditions are closing in to a degree, but looking out at the tarmac on the start-finish straight, it looks damp, but is it damp enough for Pirelli wet tyres, or are the teams going to go for the Pirelli slick tyres? Now, originally the forecast was for this rain to blow in later on this afternoon here in Norfolk. It is due to get worse throughout the course of the day as well. The weather forecast at the moment from the prevailing southwesterly winds are just going to get stronger throughout the day, and the rain is really going to close in over the course of this afternoon. But surprised that it's arrived as early here, and that probably throws a bit of a curveball to the teams, because I think, chatting to a few of them over the course of qualifying, most of the teams were expecting a dry race 1, so arguably they'll have set the cars up for what they were expecting those conditions to be. Dry. You can see the circuit doesn't look that wet. There's moisture foiling. I think with preheated Pirelli slick tyres, that's probably sufficient at the moment, but the difficulty is they'll be bolting those tyres onto the cars at the last possible moment in the pit lane. They'll then send the cars out to line up on the grid. They'll sit there for a couple of moments, then they'll be released onto what will be a formation lap, and by the time all that's happened, for the start of the race, the conditions could be even worse. We simply don't know. So this is a real roll of the dice for many of the teams here as to what they are going to put the cars out onto, the slick tyre or the wet tyre, for what is the 25-minute race. Now, we also mentioned about the championship, the group championships, the overall championship. There's also the sprint championship as well to consider, and that is for drivers that compete in just the sprint races. And Nick Phelps, who's had a bit of a difficult week, so we're so pleased Nick is on the grid this weekend, is leading that championship overall. So with the cars heading out onto the grid, let's see whether we can maybe guide you through the way that the grid will work, and hopefully we'll be able to pick up on some of the starting drivers for this particular race as well, because for the sprint race, the pros can't get involved. They are not allowed to compete in the sprint race. The amateur drivers will largely be racing. Where we have 2 amateur drivers, the teams have to identify which one will do this sprint race. And if you are partnered with what for this year is identified as being a pro sporting driver, this means that the pro sporting driver can only start in one of the sprint races, can't do both, so you can only do one of the 2 over the weekend. So again, those teams have to nominate as to which one they want to put behind the wheel if a pro sporting driver is eligible. Well, the cars are only heading round onto the grid now, so once they line up on the grid, and maybe once they head on the green flag lap, that's when we can guide you through the grid order. If we're able to bring a graphic up, we will, of course, but we could probably rattle through the grid on the formation lap, because all of the cars are simply coming out of pit lane at the moment for what is, yet again this weekend, an enormously full grid of cars. We had something like 35 cars attempt to qualify this morning. Qualifying didn't go as planned for everybody. We didn't see Charlotte Gilbert's Marcos Mantis out at all. She has elected to start off the back of the grid, I gather. The number 23 Mclaren, which is the car that is scheduled to be driven in this race by Ian Campbell, he shares with World Endurance Champion racer Ollie Webb. Ian's felt a little bit under the weather. He's feeling unwell, so under medical advice he has taken the decision not to race today. So we hope that Ian gets better overnight, and hopefully he'll be able to join the grid for tomorrow's race. Let's hope so, because it's great to see the Greystone GT cars out again this weekend. And other cars that had issues in qualifying, well, there was a coming together in qualifying between the number 61 Scott Sport Lamborghini of John Dillon and number 777 FF Corsa, Ferrari 488 of Ron Johnson. Those two had some sort of coming together. It caused damage to the front right corner of the Lamborghini, only light damage, scrapes on the bodywork and a bit of panel misalignment, and one of the dive planes, the carbon fibre dive planes on the very corner of it was broken. The Ferrari had lots of scuffs on the front of it and was being taped up at the rear of it. Now, what's that? Dylan got back out and put that car roughly where you would expect it to be. It's going to line up 6th on the grid, but for the number 777 Ferrari, I'm afraid, here it is now, you might be able to see a bit of white tape to that front right corner as you look at it coming towards us, but it's actually the front left of the car. That car is going to start down in 25th position, which would suggest that that is a little bit out of position as to where it ought to be. So we'll have to wait and see. And Ron Johnson shares that car with Tom Ingram, British Touring Car competitor, of course, who it's good to see back in the GT Cup Championship. We did see him do a one-off round last year where he raced in the Toyota GT4, but the last full season Tom did in the GT Cup Championship was back in 2015 when he was racing a Ferrari with Marcus Hogarth. But great to see him in the championship, for which of course his main focus will be the BTCC, where he currently lies second in the overall championship standings in BTCC. So there is the number 88 ABBA Racing Mercedes. That is Richard Neary that is scheduled to start this race. So Richard will be focusing on the task ahead. His son Sam, I'm sure, will be wandering around the car as he is there, bang on cue. There is Sam, the grid lining up. And good to see some other cars back in the championship for this weekend. We have got back this weekend GCAT Racing, Seamus Jennings and Greg Caton, who had such a great weekend last time out at Donington Park, where they claimed an overall win. They're back this weekend. That car will line up 7th on the grid. And that car there rejoins the championship as well. That is the Ultimate Speed Matt Manderson driven Aston Martin. Matt will be driving it in this race. He'll be sharing with Mike Brown, as is ever the case, but it's great to see that car back in the championship. But also the number 66 car, which we've seen lots of Morgan Tilbrook and Marcus Clutton, the pro, who shares with him over the course of the season. But this is the second consecutive meeting now where they brought out the number 66 GT3 McLaren, whereas really over the course of the season what we've seen them out in is a GT4 Mercedes. And if you're wondering as to how they all slot into the various groups that we have, well, the 6 different groups that we have. Group GT3, as it says on the tin really, it's for GT3 homologated cars if you're just tuning in for the first time. Group GTO is for open specification cars or low volume manufacturers, so the likes of the Can-Am Mclaren sits in that. The likes of Richard Chamberlain's fire-breathing Porsche 935 and the Radical RXC sit in Group GTO. Group GTC is for later model challenge cars, which really for this season has tended to be Lamborghini Super Trofeo cars and Ferrari 488 challenge cars to run into European specification. Group GTB is for earlier challenge cars, so that's some of the earlier Porsches, some of the other Porsche 911s, and the Marcos Mantis sits in that. Group GTH is for GT4 homologated cars, so any car that's built to GT4 homologation runs in Group GTH, and Group GTA is for lower specification Cup and Challenge cars and will make series cars. And what that has been really, I think all season, I don't think we've had anything other than a Ginetta Super Cup car, a G55 Super Cup car in Group GTH. There, look, wet tyres. That tells you what you need to know about the decision that has been taken by the pole-sitting car of Team ABBA Racing and Richard Neary. So you can see the tarmac now does look that little bit darker. It is certainly wet now out there, and I think most of the cars have probably opted for wet tyres. Yeah, you can just see the tread pattern on the side of the number 7 Steve Burgess-driven McLaren, who is driving solo this weekend. Ben Demick would usually share that car, but there was an amendment to our entry list suggests that Steve is going to drive solo this weekend, and he's just receiving some last-minute advice from Rob Weldon, the man behind Raw Motorsport that run that number 7 Radical. So that will be something that we'll have to watch out on. So we will see smiles all round though from the pair of them, so more than happy with what's going on. And then, nicely joining us again is Alex Melikan at the wheel of his GT4 Porsche. We saw Alex out for a one-off outing at Silverstone, which unfortunately resulted in a very hefty accident for him on the run down towards Stowe Corner in his McLaren, which was rather second-hand in what was a multiple car incident. But nice to see Alex back out at the wheel of this Cayman GT4, so he will line up towards the tail end of the field. I think he qualified something like 30th in terms of qualification, but there were a few cars that have got grid penalties because of carryover problems at Donington Park. So the likes of the number 15 car, which was the Century Motorsport Aston Martin, 3-place grid penalty. The likes of the number 50 car also gets a 3-place grid penalty, and that's the Veluga Motorsports Porsche. And also the other car that gets it is number 82, which is the Feathers Motorsport Aston Martin. James Guess also a 3-place grid penalty because of some problems at Donington Park, which means that those penalties will be applied at this event here. So you can see under dark skies with the spits of rain on the camera screen as well. I suspect once we get the cars rolling, that will give us an idea as to how much spray is going to be kicked up by what are very, very good Pirelli tyres at dispersing the water around this fantastic Snetterton 300 circuit. 2.9689 miles to absolutely be clear as to how precise the circuit distance is. And in terms of the marks represented, you can see just enormous variety on the grid. So the likes of Mercedes, Radical, McLaren, Aston Martin, Porsche, Lamborghini. That's just the first 6 positions on the grid. Six different marks represented. We've got the Nissan on there, the Nissan Nismo GTR, which, if you're wondering, is that going to excel in these conditions because it's 4-wheel drive? Well, the answer is it's not 4-wheel drive. It's a GT3 homologated car, so it is a rear-wheel drive Nissan. A few people did wonder earlier on in the season why the car wasn't perhaps dominating in wet. It's because it's rear-wheel drive. It's not under 4-wheel drive configuration as others have been. Of course, we've also got Ferraris on the grid as well, Ginettas on the grid as well. So a real mixture of cars on the grid. So engines being struck into life, and once they head off on the rolling lap, I will guide you through the way that they are going to line up for this 21st round of the GT Cup Championship. Remember, sprint race and a pit stop race today. We repeat that tomorrow, and by the end of the weekend, if everything goes to plan, we will be able to, subject to official confirmation and all of the technical checks that need doing, we will be able to crown our overall champion for this year. Now, we could crown a champion in this one, but it would be the Group GTB champion. All Carl Cavers at the wheel of that red Porsche that's to the left of your screen, about mid-pack. All he needs to do is finish this race. If he finishes the race, that's the Group GTB championship for him sorted. It means he's out of reach from anybody else, his fellow competitors in that group, for the rest of the weekend. So safety car with its lights flashing at the front of the grid. It will pull away very, very shortly, and you can see that, yeah, already the cars have got their lights on, windscreen wipers going in deteriorating conditions. So let's guide you then through the grid and pick out the starting drivers for this one. Pole position is number 88, Richard Neary, at the wheel of the Team ABBA Mercedes, and alongside is number 7, the car of Steve Burgess. Row 2 of the grid is the McLaren of Morgan Tilbrook, and the Aston Martin, number 47 of Matt Manderson. The third row of the grid sees the orange Porsche, Richard Chamberlain, line up alongside number 61, John Dillon's Lamborghini, and row 4 of the grid is going to be the GCAT Racing Porsche of Seamus Jennings, lining up alongside Graham Tilley's Nissan. Row 5 of the grid, that is going to be Warren Gilbert in the Group GTC leading Lamborghini. Alongside him is number 28, which is going to be Paul Bailey at the wheel of the McLaren Can-Am, one of only 3 cars that were ever built to that particular specification. And row 6 of the grid is number 41, which for this race will be Fraser Smart, lining up alongside 155, Lauren Demise, back in the championship with us, having last appeared at Silverstone. Row 7 of the grid, number 56, the Ferrari of Roy Millington, lines up alongside 96, which is Chris Kemp. And row 8 of the grid is number 24, which is going to be Andre Borodin, back out at the wheel of the GT3 McLaren for Greystone GT, lining up alongside 35, which is the Group GTB leading car from qualifying, Nick Phelps. The 9th row of the grid is number 1, Orange Racing, powered by JMH. That will be Josh Jackson, lining up alongside 26, Paddock Motorsport, Mo Ritson on board for this race. And row 10 of the grid is number 90, Balf Motorsport McLaren, is Mike Price, and alongside is car number 212. That's the Group GTA leading car from qualifying, Make It Happen Racing, the Ginetta of Chris Hart. Row 11 of the grid is number 67 rather, Simon Orange, alongside 82, Feathers Motorsport and James Guess. Row 12 of the grid is 777, Ron Johnson, and car number 118, which is the Fox Motorsport Ginetta of Ian Duggan for this race. Row 13 of the grid, 77, that's one of the Greystone GT McLarens, Mark Hopton, alongside car number 15, which is the Century Motorsport David Holloway driven Aston Martin. Row 14 of the grid is number 50, Carl Cavers in his Porsche, and alongside is number 17, which is going to be Russ Lindsay in the second of the 2 Orange Racing, powered by JMH Ginettas. The next row of the grid will be row number 15. That is car number 44, the Paddock Motorsport and Signature RV jointly entered car of John Whitehouse. Former champion was John a couple of seasons ago, alongside car number 32, which is the Redline Racing Alex Melikan driven Porsche that we saw heading towards the tail end of the field. And the final 2 rows of the grid will be car number 22, Richard Mason in his McLaren, the number 6, Century Motorsport Ginetta G55, and off the back of the grid, the back row of the grid, we see car number 72, 24/7 Motorsport, Mike Coker, Aston Martin GT N24, and it should be at the tail end of the field, car number 3, which is Charlotte Gilbert with the Marcus Mantis, and that gives you what is a very full 34 car grid, and as I mentioned earlier on, 35 qualified, but based on medical advice, Ian Campbell, who is unwell today, has been told not to race, and I think that's a sensible decision. He was feeling a bit under the weather earlier on. Information from the team initially thought one thing. He's been and had some medical checks, and they've suggested leave it for today, see how you feel tomorrow, and go from there. So we are going to have 2 formation laps because the car's qualified in dry conditions, but we are now going to be racing in wet conditions. The cars will have 2 formation laps, but in reality, at the start of the second formation lap, the clock has already started ticking. So whilst it says 25 minutes on the clock now, the clock, in terms of the timekeepers, is already starting to click down. So this second green flag lap will simply eat in to that 25-minute allocation for the GT Cup Championship round 21. So we've seen so many wins from that Team ABBA Racing Mercedes over the course of the season. Remember, last time we were here, it was 4 out of 4 for father and son pairing Sam and Richard Neary. Really was a stellar weekend for them. They'd already taken 4 wins even prior to coming here, so by the time they'd done the clean sweep at Snetterton, that put them on 8 wins. They've now claimed another 4 since, with wins at Holton Park and at Silverstone on the Grand Prix circuit. Donington Park last time out was amazingly the only weekend of racing we've had where they've not claimed at least 1 win. So they are the most winningest driver pairing over the course of this season. But Steve Burgess, who lines up alongside on the outside of the front row of the grid, propelled that car to its first overall win at Donington Park last time out as well. So Steve comes into this weekend, yes, driving solo because Ben Dimmock isn't sharing, but the team and the driver who's behind the wheel now, Steve Burgess, will be more than pleased with his performance at Donington Park. Yes, they had a few other issues over the course of the weekend which created a non-finish and a non-start in the final 2 races, but they got that not just group win, that overall win that they've been rooting for. There's the number 28 McLaren Can-Am. It looks like an MP412C. It is based on an MP412C, but that car has more aerodynamics than the MP412C GT3 had. It's got more power as well, and McLaren only ever built 3 cars to that specification. Paul Bailey, who is a collector of supercars, who has a fantastic array of supercars in his collection, has opted to use that one, whilst the Brabham is still just awaiting a few little parts. It was nip and tuck. They thought they were going to get the car out for this race meeting, but I think with a mixture of parts availability and other general issues, the logistics of getting the parts over and then getting the time to get them on the car, I think that the sensible decision was taken. Let's bring the McLaren out again. It served us well at Donington Park, and we can give this fairly rare car another run out. So the lights are out on the safety car, the clock ticking away. As I mentioned, a 25-minute race, but this second lap, second of the formation laps, the green flag lap, because of the dry qualifying conditions and now the wet race conditions, is going to be conducted eating into that time that we've got, but the cars will already start to get themselves into 2x2 order. Remember, we're not going to claim an overall champion in this race. We potentially and are highly likely to be crowning a Group GTB champion, Nick Phelps, but he does need to finish the race. If he doesn't finish the race, there's that red Porsche there, that's the one we need to watch out for, Nick Phelps. As I say, it's had a bit of a rotten weekend, really, business-wise, so we wish Nick all of the best and hope that normality returns to his business very shortly. He was a driver that initially wasn't going to be out this weekend, but I think he's decided that there's a championship up for grabs, and, you know, why should he suffer as a result of something that he's not been in control of. So we're about to get things underway for the first time this weekend, our finals weekend in 2021 for the GT Cup Championship. The safety car will peel its way in towards the pit lane, and we are going to get our first sprint race of the weekend underway. Richard Neary and Steve Burgess on the front row of the grid, and as the lights go out, they accelerate their way up towards Richie's corner for the first time. Richard Neary has the inside line. Steve Burgess, though, on the less polished surface. The outer line might work here in the wet conditions. Let's hope that everybody treads gingerly through the first couple of corners, because it's a very full grid, and it's a track which has worsened over the course of the last 10 minutes. Steve Burgess has taken up the early lead in the race, but takes a wide sweep through the Wilson hairpin and then gets bottled up a little bit behind the Mercedes on the exit of the corner, whilst he needs to watch his mirrors, because John Dillon's had a good start as well. He's come from 6th on the grid up into 3rd position, so he's already managed to carve his way through a little bit of traffic, including the likes of the CTR Developments Porsche of Richard Chamberlain. He's got past the Ultimate Speed Aston Martin as well. So John Dillon has had a rocket of a start in reality up to 3rd, and now is going for 2nd place up the inside of Steve Burgess. Now they accelerate their way out of Agostini. You can see those wider lines being taken. The outside line round through some of the corners works better in the wet because the tarmac is less polished. It hasn't got as much rubber on it, and there's just that little bit more grip if you run offline. Charlotte Gilbert did start from the tail end of the field, and there we've had a spin for Laurent Demise. Just saw him on the inside of Agostini. He's rotated the Ferrari, so that is going to drop Laurent all the way down towards the tail end of the field, I'm afraid. There he goes, he recovers now, but he has dropped to the very, very tail end of the field in his first sprint race of the weekend. So you can see there's not that much spray coming up down the straights, really. It is certainly wet enough that I think all of the cars have opted for the Pirelli wet tyre, but for Richard Neary, he is leading the way. It is John Dillon in 2nd place. Leading Group GTO is the 3rd place car, which is going to be Steve Burgess. 4th at the moment is Matt Manderson at the wheel of the silver Aston Martin. 5th is going to be Morgan Tilbrook, and Richard Chamberlain completes the top 6 at the moment. Nick Phelps in the red Porsche is leading Group GTB, and with Charlotte Gilbert having started in her Group GTB Marcos off the tail end of the field, Nick Phelps is probably on course for a group win here. That's not doing any disrespect whatsoever for Charlotte, but if she wants to try and take the lead of the group and keep the championship alive, A, she needs to hope that that red Porsche doesn't finish, and B, she's got to carve away all the way past all of that traffic that started ahead of her. So Group GTB leading Porsche, Group GTA leading Ginetta, Group GTH, I think that will be leading McLaren over the start-finish line, as Josh Jackson propels himself past the Make It Happen Racing Chris Hart-driven Ginetta. The GT4 McLaren, with a bit more grunt in the straight line, carves itself through and ahead, and that was indeed, yeah, Group GTB Porsche, Group GTH McLaren, Group GTA Ginetta. They are all leading their particular groups at this early stage of the race, as they fight over what will be 11th, 12th and 13th positions, I think it will be. There's number 41. Now that is Fraser Smart, and Fraser will be trying to hunt down the Aston Martin that lies ahead of him, because that would be the Group GTC leader, I would have thought that would be, which would be Warren Gilbert. Yeah, so the silver and light green Lamborghini coming towards us now. Warren Gilbert, car number 9 in 9th place, leads Group GTC. The car behind him is the car that's 2nd in Group GTC and lies 10th overall in the race. So that is a fight, not fully formed, but if those two Lamborghinis get themselves together, that would be for the lead of the group as well. So we'll have to keep an eye towards that one. Warren Gilbert, who is pushing on solo again this weekend. Jensen Lund, still recovering from some surgery a couple of weekends ago, has again very kindly allowed his car to be driven, that he owns, by Warren Gilbert solo over the course of this weekend. Warren Gilbert was a GT Cup champion in Group GTB back in 2018. He's raced TVR Tuscans in the past as Warren, and has been very much a fundamental regular part of GT Cup for a good few seasons now. Now the gap 1st to 2nd is coming down here. 2 Group GT3 cars. Richard Neary pushing on in the front-engined Mercedes, the rear-engined or mid-engined Lamborghini of John Dillon, looking to try and close in here. Now remember, John Dillon's car did get involved in a skirmish in qualifying, so there's a little bit of damage just to the front right corner of his car that I'm sure Aaron Scott and the Scott Sport team have repaired in the break between qualifying and the race. But even if there's a little bit of residual damage, it is certainly not affecting John Dillon now, who is hot on the heels of Richard Neary for the lead of the race, and just posts the fastest lap that we've seen so far on the first of the flying laps at 2 minutes 12.967. 2 minutes 12.967. And just to give you an idea, pole time was a 1 minute 48, so we're the best part of 24 seconds slower on the first flying lap than we were for the fastest lap that was set in pole in the qualifying session. So it just goes to show how much conditions have deteriorated over the course of the last couple of hours between qualifying and the start of this race. So for the 3rd time, working their way out of Palmer and then starting to stretch the legs on the car again as they head up towards the braking area for Agostini. Lead advantage was just over 0.8 of a second as they came over the start-finish line last time through between the race-leading Mercedes and the Lamborghini there in second place. Steve Burgess in the Radical has settled into third position and is still the Group GTO leader at this stage. And then fourth and fifth will be Matt Manderson and Morgan Tilbrook in their Aston Martin and McLaren respectively, with Richard Chamberlain in the Porsche 935 completing the top six. Good to see Richard back out this weekend. He had a bit of a difficult weekend at Donington Park where the car had a braking issue, which meant that he went in towards the Melbourne hairpin at Donington, hit the brakes, and there was absolutely nothing. So 3 quick pumps of the brake, nothing came back, and they established afterwards. Had he have had the time to do a fourth pump, that might have done what they needed to do, but they couldn't fix the car at the circuit, therefore they opted to retire it for the weekend. Now this here is Nick Phelps with one hand on the overall championship in Group GTB. He is coming under pressure from the Group GTA leading Make It Happen Racing Ginetta of Chris Hart. What Nick won't want to do is get involved in the squabble, particularly with that car. He can afford the Ginetta to go by and could then just sort of settle into a gap that exists behind, but Nick is a racer through and through. The Porsche in a straight line quicker than the Ginetta, so he's pulled away and is now hot on the coattails of the Group GTH leading McLaren that's in the hands of Josh Jackson, who is bottled up behind the car that's currently second in Group GTC, which is going to be Fraser Smart. So the more powerful cars not able to use the power in what are, I think, ever worsening conditions. There's a bit more spray coming up now than there was at the start of the race. And for Josh Jackson, is he going to try around the outside of that Lamborghini? I think he might. And it also looks as though Chris Hart is trying around the outside of Nick Phelps. Yeah, so McLaren gains a place over Lamborghini, Ginetta gains a place over Porsche, but in a straight line, Nick Phelps rockets back past again at the wheel of his Porsche, and Fraser Smart at the wheel of the Lamborghini also dives straight through. But the new fastest lap of the race, as you can see from John Dillon last time through, 2 minutes 12.826 means that the gap that was 0.8 of a second is now down to 0.3 of a second between himself and the race leading Mercedes. But it's this great little fight that we've got going on between all the cars that are in different groups at the moment that's quite intriguing. 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th positions. Richard Chamberlain also coming under pressure from Seamus Jennings, the substantively newer Porsche 991, bottled up behind what is an enormously developed Porsche over the years of Richard Chamberlain. Bought this car from Mike Yules some years ago now, and it now looks nothing like when he first bought it. There were some pictures on the internet that I handed to Richard earlier on in the season. It shows what the car was when he bought it compared to what it looks like now, and yeah, it's just been developed, and there's probably not a great deal of the original car left, but it's always great to see out the flame-spitting orange Porsche 935 of Richard Chamberlain, who is doing a really good job at the moment of hanging on to 6th place, despite the fact that he's got the Northern Irishman, Seamus Jennings, not that far behind him at the wheel of a car that is, what, the best part of 30, if not 40 years newer. So down the straight, this is where the Porsche 935 of Richard Chamberlain will really pull away from the newer car that sits behind. You can see the Nissan just in the background as well, which is Graham Tilley, who sits there in 8th place currently. Almost halfway through this race now as well. 25-minute race. Yes, the second green flag lap under the safety car meant that the clock started ticking away, but we're now halfway through the allocated time for this 21st round of the GT Cup Championship. And for Richard Chamberlain, he is second in Group GTO at the moment. The car that's third in Group GTO is going to be Paul Bailey, isn't it, who has dropped all the way down to 17th in these conditions. Not unsurprising at the wheel of a very rare and very expensive car. So Paul will be doing the maths as he's driving. He knows that he's in the lead of the championship standings in the group, in Group GTO. And even if he does finish third in the group, it's still more points. His main championship rival, of course, Steve Burgess, leading the points. Now, Morgan Tilbrook's put the fastest lap in now. 2 minutes 11.356 from the number 66 McLaren of Morgan Tilbrook. So a really good lap put in by him. He might be closing in towards the coattails of the Radical before too much longer. There's the number 50 for Lugo Motorsport, Porsche Cayman of Carl Cavers. He's got former British GT racer Ron Johnson just ahead of him. Ron, who raced for Speedworks in a Corvette in the British GT Championship some years ago, also did a chunk of Ginetta G50, I think it was racing, G55 racing did Ron some years ago. good to see Ron back out. I don't think he's done quite a great deal over the course of the last few seasons. Now, for the lead of the race, the gap has gone back out again last time through. Remember that John Dillon got the gap down with that fastest lap of the race back down to 0.3 of a second. It's gone back out to 0.9, as you can see on the left-hand side of your screens now. Down straight, John Dillon has now been caught by Steve Burgess as well, so the gap at the start of this lap was 2 seconds Lamborghini to Radical RXC. Well, now John Dillon is starting to feel the pressure a little bit more. Now, I do wonder if perhaps maybe that car either has a compromised setup on it that isn't quite as suited to the deteriorating conditions, or surely they couldn't have started that car on wet, so it looks to be too much spray coming out of it, and I think had they have done, I'm sure we'd have seen John into the pits by now. And off, that is the Group GTH leader that is off, and that is Josh Jackson that is parking the orange racing powered by JMH McLaren at the side of the road. Now, he has already stitched up the Group GTH Championship for this season, but was right up there in 4th place in the overall championship standings as Steve Burgess goes through at the wheel of the Radical, picks up the place going in towards Richie's corner, but I think ran a little bit wide. Yeah, so straight back through goes John Dillon into what will be the lead of the race by the look of things, because Richard Neary must have made a mistake on that lap in the middle sector. I think the Mercedes has had an off, so this is now for the lead of the race. So Steve Burgess leading, John Dillon going backwards, John Dillon leading, Steve Burgess with him, Morgan Tilbrook in on the mix as well, and quite what happened to Richard Neary, I don't know, but that Mercedes lost the best part of 13 seconds in the middle sector of the lap, and I think that's going to drop him down into 5th position now. Here comes Matt Manderson in the Aston Martin in 4th. Yeah, now that's the Mercedes behind him, 5th place. So Richard Neary did have an off somewhere, and that has dropped him down into 5th position, and that is Warren Gilbert is off. We've not seen a single mistake from Warren all season hardly, so a spin at the wheel of the car that was leading, Group GTC, just going to show how tricky the conditions are now getting out there. So Warren Gilbert with a mistake, that drops him possibly out of the group lead. We'll have to wait and see. Yes, it does, because coming towards us now is Fraser Smart, is it? No, that is John Dillon rather. Very similarly liveried cars those two have. So our race leader coming towards us, a little bit of traffic just up the road to deal with before too much longer. Lamborghini leaves Radical, leads McLaren, 1st, 2nd and 3rd. So that's a Group GT3 Lamborghini, a Group GTO Radical, a Group GT3 McLaren, which also has a problem there and loses time coming out of Brundle and Nelson in the hands of Morgan Tilbrook. Car sort of faltered on the way out of the corner there. It was almost as though he had to restart the car almost. So that's allowed Steve Burgess to build an advantage again all of a sudden, just as Morgan Tilbrook had set the fastest lap of the race last time through. 2 minutes 9.929. I'm not sure conditions are improving, but I think it's probably now, yeah, you can see the rain is belting down now, and I think the reason that we're seeing fastest laps come in on the previous lap was, and there's an off. That's Fraser Smart, who had taken over the lead of Group GTC at the wheel of the Lamborghini. That's going to put Warren Gilbert, who had the spin a couple of laps ago, back through. Through goes Warren Gilbert, so shortly lived lead in Group GTC for Fraser Smart. He'll try and fire that car back into life, but we're seeing more and more cars making mistakes now, and I do wonder if that's maybe the cars that had started on slick tyres. You can run on a wet track on slicks as long as you have tyre temperature, and as soon as that tyre temperature drops off, if the track gets too wet and you lose all of the temperature, that's when you're in trouble. And I'm wondering now if that's what's happening. Maybe a few of the cars now have just lost all tyre temp if they're on slicks. So through and over the start-finish sign now go. 7 minutes to go in this race. John Dillon leads Steve Burgess by 1.8 seconds as they came over the start-finish line to complete lap number 6. The fight we're looking at here is Richard Chamberlain, who has still got bottled up behind him the newer Porsche of Seamus Jennings. This is for 6th and for 7th position. Onto the brakes, in towards Agostini, the two of them go. Be so gentle on the throttle coming out of the corner. There you can see the stricken car off on the right-hand side there of Josh Jackson. Fraser Smart has recovered following his spin as well. See the rain now is absolutely pelting it down around the circuit, and it certainly looks very unpleasant there now. This was originally forecast to be a dry race, but Weather has blown in a little bit quicker than I think the forecast had given. For Fraser Smart, is he going to continue? We'll have to see whether he continues or pops into the pit lane after his spin. Traffic now to deal with, so through goes Steve Burgess and Morgan Tilbrook, lapping what is Charlotte Gilbert, who stays neatly out of the way. Sensible driving by Charlotte just to let the quicker cars go through. Watching her mirrors and picking up on the blue flags that the marshals are giving with just 6 minutes remaining. And I think John Dillon starting to scamper away now into an ever increased lead. It was 1.8 seconds the lead. The battle of the two Porsches still continuing as well. Richard Chamberlain doing a really good job of just getting the door closed in time there on Seamus Jennings. See the spray coming off the back of the cars now. That part of the circuit around through Coram, which is a sweeping right-hander. The tyres having to work overtime to try and disperse the water. The aerodynamics so important on the cars as well. In a straight line, the Group GTO Porsche should pull away from the Group GT3 machine. They're side by side this time as they come over the start-finish line, but I would imagine the orange car has more grunt, and therefore, yeah, Richard Chamberlain eases his way just back ahead again as they head in towards the braking area for Richie's corner. That's a great little fight that's going on for the final place inside the top six, which for the moment is being held by the Porsche 935 of Richard Chamberlain. Seamus Jennings brakes a lot later, tries the wider sweep through Wilson. Is he going to try and get the undercut? Well, if he does on the way out, that would still put him on the outside line for Palmer. So as they run up towards the left-hander now, Richard Chamberlain has the inside line in the orange Porsche. Seamus Jennings on the less polished surface is going to have to brave it out around the outside if he wants to make it stick, and he has done. Through he goes, but now there's another straight, which puts the pendulum back in favour of Richard Chamberlain, who's now got the inside line for Agostini, but can't quite get on the power enough. So sensible driving by both, hard, fair, but it does mean that they are now in a different position, as are these cars as well, because Morgan Tilbrook has now made it up into second position. So through and past the Radical in a straight line. The Group GTO Radical, has it got more grunt? Can he go back through? Yes, he can. Steve Burgess retakes the place down the Bentley straight. And that's all to do with the different groups that these cars sit in. More power in the Group GTO cars, perhaps better aero in these conditions in the GT3 cars, but overall, Steve Burgess sticking his elbows out and fighting it out in his Group GTO Radical with the Group GT3 car, and that's what we were seeing from the two Porsches as well, wasn't it? Group GTO for Richard Chamberlain, Group GT3 for Seamus Jennings, but good little fight they've had. Up towards the conclusion of lap number 7 this will be. There is Laurent Demise, the number 155 Ferrari. That's the car that had the spin on the very first lap, if you recall. It's looking to try and work its way up through the order. And at the moment he's mixed amongst Group GTA Ginettas and Group GTH, mixture of McLarens and Aston Martins there. So that is Laurent Demise, who should be able to pick those lesser powered cars off. Heading towards us now. This is James Guest now, trying to get the overlap on Mike Price at the wheel of the Balfe Motorsport prepared McLaren, whilst Laurent Demise is trying to weave his way through the order. Now, where is Mike Price in terms of the race? He is in 15th position. There's also a spin and a recovering car as well. That's the Fox Motorsport car that has just managed to have a rotation. Ian Duggan. So Laurent Demise, yeah, the Ferrari in a straight line, has picked off Mike Price. So Mike Price was running in 14th position, was second in Group GTH actually at the moment. The car that's behind him, the Aston Martin, is James Guest, who is going to be third in Group GTH, and the car that's fourth in Group GTH is just behind that as well, which is the number 44 McLaren of John Whitehouse. And that's a car that's worked its way through the order well, actually. John Whitehouse in that number 44 McLaren started something like 29th position, I think it was, on the grid, something like that. And he's worked his way up into 17th by the end of that lap, so it's been a really good drive from the former champion. John Whitehouse and Steve Rushton having claimed this championship back in 2019. That was the overall championship as well, they claimed. So 2 minutes to go. And spray, as you can see, has got far, far worse now as the weather's closed in. But for John Dillon, he's got a 2-second gap between himself and the car in second position, which is Steve Burgess as they came over the start-finish line, and Steve has still managed to hang on to it here. So Morgan Tilbrook might be slightly quicker through the twiddly parts, but in a straight line, the extra grunt of the Group GTO Radical is just doing enough to keep the Nottingham-based man, Steve Burgess, multiple former Radical champion, ahead of Morgan Tilbrook. Steve Burgess has been a champion on four wheels on many occasions. Big wiggle from the Radical there as it comes out of Murray's that time through. Sitting sideways in the middle of the circuit on the exit of Palmer is James Guess, who's had a spin at the wheel of the Feathers Motorsport Aston Martin. Oh, and as he tries to rejoin the circuit, he takes out Cole Cavers, I'm afraid. Cole Cavers then has a spin directly in front of Ed Borodin. Well, that was I think James Guess was trying to get the car out of harm's way as quickly as he could to avoid getting sideswiped, and then maybe just didn't quite see where Cole Cavers was. So contact between the front of the Aston Martin as it tried to recover, and Cole Cavers, who was just about to go past the Aston Martin. It's sort of contact between the two of them. Unfortunate incident. And then there's a spin for Ed Borodin as well. So everybody having problems in these tricky conditions here. The McLaren GT3 has a spin. Cole Cavers will continue, but will limp back to the pit lane, I'm afraid, at the wheel of the Faluga Motorsport car. And off has gone John Dillon, who was the race leader. So no matter where we look, cars are having problems. This is potentially the final lap of the race for John Dillon. There's Ed Borodin trying to reverse the car out of the way. Steve Burgess, through all of this in the Radical, has gone through now to take up the lead of the race, but is still under pressure from Morgan Tilbrook at the wheel of the GT3 McLaren. You don't know where to look because there's so many squabbles going on, and cars making mistakes and drivers making mistakes in these tricky conditions. And Morgan Tilbrook now is trying to side his way up the inside of the Radical. Couldn't quite do it as they went through Oggies. He won't do it through Williams. Down the straight, the pendulum will swing back in favour of what will be the Radical. Richard Chamberlain is trying to stick his elbows out again and work his way past the car of Seamus Jennings. So battles everywhere, conditions worsening, and well, the 21st round of the GT Cup Championship has proved to be a very unusual and very strange affair. So Steve Burgess, for the final time, heads out of Brundle and Nelson. In the background, John Dillon goes off again, whilst Morgan Tilbrook tries to get a run on the race leader heading up towards the bomb hole. Can't quite make it stick through the bomb hole, so time and opportunities are running out here for Morgan Tilbrook. He desperately wants the overall win. He would still win Group GT3, even if he sits behind the Radical, which is moving around like crazy as it heads through Cora. Morgan Tilbrook is very decisive, dives up the inside heading in towards the final corner. Can he get the car stopped in time? Steve Burgess is going to get the overlap, and with a bit more power, the Radical on the run to the line should grab the win as they head up towards the start-finish line. It looks as though it's going to be a win for Steve Burgess. The extra power just telling us they came out of Murray. Steve Burgess comes through to claim the win. Morgan Tilbrook in second place, but will pick up top honours in Group GT3. That was a great fight between those two. John Dillon comes through despite his rally crossing moments to finish in third place, and Matt Manderson will slither his way through into fourth position. The battles out on circuit still continuing as well, as Ron Johnson's Ferrari coming under pressure from David Holloway's car. This is Roy Millington fighting away with Lauren Demise. Roy Millington's car runs in Group GTC. It's a Ferrari Challenge spec car. It's a GT3 car of Lauren Demise that should be able to go through there. A little bit more power, a little bit better aero on the GT3 car, so I think we'll see that blue and orange car go through, yeah, because it runs in a higher group in reality. Through goes Lauren Demise, which means that car there is now going to be up into 13th position, which isn't bad considering it had a spin and dropped down to, what was it, 34th on the very first lap for Lauren Demise. For Roy Millington, it looks as though it's going to be second in Group GTC at the wheel of that Ferrari. And off has gone Paul Bailey, and that looks as though the McLaren Can-Am might possibly have made a little bit of contact with the barriers there. Let's just have a quick look. Let's hope not, because that, as we say, is a quite rare car. And no, I think it's all right. If it was a touch, it was a light touch for Paul Bailey, which is just going to show how difficult the conditions have become over the course of the last 25 minutes. And this is going to be for the final two spots on the podium in Group GTH. Looks as though Mike Price might just hold off John Whitehouse here on the charge to the line. John's almost alongside, might have his nose ahead, has he? No, just behind on the charge to the line. Mike Price hung on to it by just over 1/10 of a second to finish in 15th position overall in what was a great squabble all the way down through the field. Still more cars piling their way over the start-finish line as the last few cars take the checkered flag, and then we can look towards hopefully being able to confirm a result or two. It could have been a win, couldn't it, for that car there, the number 88 car, but there's stories to be told. Richard Neary in the middle sector of the lap lost the best part of 13 seconds on one lap, whilst having been leading the race. It wasn't to be on this occasion, and that has implications for the championship because they were the overall championship leaders coming into that particular race. Warren Gilbert, who also had his problems and had a spin, won his group So that would be 25 points picked up for the group win for Warren Gilbert. For Sam and Richard Neary, they will have finished fourth in the group, but there will be a couple of cars that are non-point scoring in terms of the championship for this weekend. So it may well be that whilst they finish fourth in the race, the group winners in Group GT3 are non-championship scoring. The car that was third in Group GT3 is non-championship scoring, so they pick up the points for second in reality. So 18 points for them compared to 25 for Warren Gilbert. So there's a swing of 8 points, so the gap will close first to second in terms of the overall championship standings, and confirmation also that with Nick Phelps, I think, having come through and secured Group GTB in 9th position overall. There he is, number 35, Nick Phelps. Difficult week for him, as I say, but that's the way to cap it. Not just a top 10 finish, but a win in Group GTB, and that does now mean that Nick Phelps is the Group GTB champion, subject to official confirmation, of course, in the GT Cup Championship for 2021. So congratulations to him. That is, I think, the only champion we can crown in that race, because others were either crowned at Donington or they'll carry on to either this afternoon's race, or maybe it goes down, and let's hope so, to the final races of the season. So well done to Nick Phelps for claiming top honours in that. And the car behind as well, which was the Ginetta, is also the group winner in Group GTA in that race, the number 212 Ginetta. So that was Chris Hart, who came home as the winner in Group GTA. So let's confirm the results with you then for round 21 of the GT Cup Championship as the cars make their way in towards the pit lane at a soggy Snetterton. Steve Burgess claims the win overall and the win in Group GTA, with Morgan Tilbrook in second place claiming the top honours in Group GT3. John Dillon was third, with Matt Manderson fourth, and Richard Neary, what could have been, as he finished in fifth place. Richard Chamberlain has a busy race. He finished in sixth, ahead of Seamus Jennings in seventh, and Graham Tilley in eighth place. Nick Phelps came through in ninth, but also claimed Group GTB win and claimed the championship in the case of the number 35 car, and completing the top 10 was car number 212, which claimed top honours in Group GTA. That was Chris Hart. In 11th position, as we look outside of the top 11, Group GTC win went the way of Warren Gilbert. In 12th place, it was car number 26 that finished in 12th place, Mo Ritson, with Lauren Demise in 13th, Roy Millington 14th, Mike Price in 15th, ahead of John Whitehouse 16th, Simon Orange 17th, Ron Johnson 18th, Alex Melikan 19th, and it was David Holloway that completed the top 20. Then it was going to be in 21st position, car number 22, off the back of the grid for Richard Mason, made good progress. Mark Hopton was 22nd, ahead of Ian Duggan, Carl Cavers, Fraser Smart, Chris Kemp. Paul Bailey, despite the spin in the Mclaren Can-Am, finished in 27th position, and 28th was the number 17 car. That was Russ Lindsay for that race, ahead of Ed Borodin, who we saw have a couple of spins, and Michael Coker, who finished in 30th position. And then just outside of the top 30, Alex Stevenson from Charlotte Gilbert. James Guest retired, we saw following contact in the Aston Martin. We also saw Josh Jackson retire the McLaren. So I think 32 cars finishing out of the 34 cars starting. But that is the start of a busy weekend here for the GT Cup Championship at Snetterton. Weather has closed in. We're expecting it to be even wetter and even breezier this afternoon based on the forecasts. But do join us for our pit stop race that's coming up later on this afternoon. So until then, from everybody here at Snetterton, Butte Motorsport and the GT Cup, it's a goodbye.